All right, welcome everybody. We're going to give it a couple of minutes for people to join here. And just about another minute, folks, and we'll get started. All right, Ryan, what do you say we get going here?
Tom, let's
welcome.
do it.
Yeah, welcome everybody to the Foursquare AWS webinar, talking about some data that we're seeing from COVID-19 and how it impacted retail. I think you're going to see some things that are pretty fascinating, things we probably know just from hindsight, but then some things that the data's uncovered that hopefully will be some learnings for you. So again, welcome to the webinar. I'm Tom Litchford. I am the global lead for the retail industry here at AWS. And with that, again, we have Ryan Neighbors with us, who I'll introduce in a minute. Ryan and his and Foursquare are part of something we call the AWS Data Exchange. And we've done quite a few talks and webinars around AI, ML. And one of the consistent feedback I get is that, we're not dependent just upon our own data. We need external data to drive better decisions. And that's exactly what AWS Data Exchange was built for. It was launched in 2019, and it includes partners such as Foursquare, providing all sorts of data sets. It's kind of a gold mine, some free, some subscription service, but I believe there's over 1,000 data products today provided by 80 different providers. And again, this is data like weather, demographics, or what you're going to see today, foot traffic and places type data that can augment your own retail data to help you make better decisions in terms of what you're trying to do in terms of impacting retail. So with that, one housekeeping thing I wanted to go through, you should see a Q&A or a questions button on your GoToWebinar panel. And as we're talking, if you have questions, we're going to save time at the end to answer these. So just type them right into that question panel, and we'll try to get through as many as we can. And if by chance we don't, we'll respond to you after the fact. So with that, Ryan, I'm going to kind of get out of your way and let you get going. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us about Foursquare?
Yeah, Tom, thanks very much. And big thanks to the ADX team, the AWS team, and my Foursquare team here. As Tom alluded to, I lead the retail vertical here at Foursquare. Primary responsibility is to help brands activate our location data for a multitude of downstream use cases, some of which we'll talk about today. Little background on Foursquare. We are the leading independent location technology platform. For us, location is at the core of everything we do. We understand location, how people move through the real world, how those patterns change over time, and we use that knowledge and proprietary technologies to help brands, developers, marketers, and analysts understand consumers and to how to better engage with those users. During the course of our time today, we've got a lot of materials to chump through. So what I'm going to do is kind of give you an overview of what we've looked at. We're going to dive into our methodology. We'll review the agenda, and then we'll work through 2019 and uncover some of the findings that we found, and hopefully spur some thoughts into how your marketing teams, your data science teams, your data engineer teams can ingest the data and leverage the data to increase loyalty, decrease churn, increase personalization. So here at Foursquare, we've been closely following the changes and trends in consumer behavior across various categories since the pandemic began in early March last year. In an effort to help brands and marketers understand the impact of COVID on consumer behavior in the United States, we started almost immediately releasing COVID analyses since March of 2020, which analyzed foot traffic trends across retail, dining, travel, entertainment, and really dove in to understand how those verticals were impacted. Today's report is going to be a culmination of those top trends and insights from year one of the pandemic. Since early March, the retail industry, unfortunately, has experienced dramatic shifts in foot traffic and consumer behaviors. While many brick and mortar shops were forced to temporarily close due to stay-at-home orders and other restrictions, some retail categories saw significant upticks in foot traffic as consumers stocked up on essentials, picked up new hobbies, and adapted to a socially distanced lifestyle. Our COVID analyses, which we will make available in our follow-ups to this webinar today, helped folks answer questions like, how quickly are consumers returning to their favorite places? How are volumes impacted by the changing restrictions on social distancing? How do businesses themselves respond to the changing matters? To what extent are they doing so? And lastly, how does all this vary by type of place, by region, by demographic, and more? Our methodology is very simple. We analyze foot traffic patterns from millions of Americans that make up our always on panel. To date, we have over 200 million devices in which we're able to ascertain always on location insights from the devices in a privacy compliant manner. All data is either anonymized, pseudo-anonymized, or aggregated, and is normalized against US Census data to remove age, gender, and geographical bias. We use index foot traffic to demonstrate the relative decline in visits to different types of places, where average daily visits in the benchmark period are 100. We analyze data on a 7-day rolling basis to reduce the effects of foot traffic trends introduced by certain days of the week. For example, bars and clubs typically experience an uptick on Fridays and Saturdays. All right, now that we're done with that, let's go.
Ryan, I'm excited here. I mean, you already got me going because I heard that term consumer trends. And you know what's interesting about that is almost every retailer I talk to doesn't really understand these consumer trends. And I think that's so important in terms of, yeah, we have basket analysis, we have, what shoppers are doing on the web and things like that. But if you truly knew those trends and the technologies that consumers were using, it would give you kind of an up on where do you need to be, inserting your brand and removing that friction. So, boy, if you've got the data to help us there, I think it's going to be important.
Yeah, Tom, I'm glad you brought that up now. The way that for the folks that are here on the webinar can kind of look at how these data sets, and we're going to touch on this later on in the presentation, is, as you mentioned, the brands themselves have access to a vast amount of rich first-party data. And we're now getting to the time where, these data sets aren't siloed and they're being leveraged and then activated across many different orgs within the organization. What all brands are aspiring to do is create that 360 customer profile. And what they miss and what we offer is that location layer of helping them better predict how their consumer will react, better personalize based on where they've gone, how often they've gone. And ultimately that culminates to an enrichment exercise where you're really starting to get that much closer to anticipating needs with activating ML and AI models but then
Right.
also delivering real-time and relevant engagements in the moments.
Exactly. I love the real-time part too.
Yeah,
Well, let's
most
keep
definitely,
going
Tom.
then. I can't
Yeah,
wait.
thank you. All right, so for the agenda today, we're going to cover off again on year one of the pandemic. We're going to take a tighter look at some of the key trends that we came across. We're going to go into a deep dive. We're going to look at the month of the March, April, July, October, and what you're going to see when we get into that section is it's just not going to be looked at on a national level. We're going to be breaking this down by region as well. And you can start to see our data goes from macro view to a very micro view down to the venue level specifics. And lastly, we're going to end with some key takeaways, how to reach your consumers, measure that impact, measure your effectiveness, and ultimately drive the impact of your campaigns that you'll be leveraging. So some key trends that we identified, as Tom kind of said, right, a lot of this is in hindsight. So some of these pieces that we'll speak to, everybody will probably be sitting at their computer screens, smiling at me, shaking their heads, going, yep, we saw that. But I think what's important to really extrapolate from that is that when you're looking at third-party data sets, you have to trust the data that you're bringing on. It has to be reliable. And through our continual focus on sharing weekly analyses on how these trends have been impacted, we are eating from our own bowl of porridge when we're creating these. And so I think it's important for you folks to keep that in mind here. So what we saw, big trend was a huge shift in travel patterns to the retail stores. When we get into a couple charts here, we'll see the significant decline in foot traffic as of March 13th, stay-at-home orders were activated. And through the pandemic, it introduced more flexibility into consumers' workday schedules. So we saw as many working professionals were forced to work remotely within months of the COVID-19 outbreak. Most retail categories saw an uptick midweek, midday, as opposed to evenings and weekends. Our consumers were likely to avoid those retail times around prime shopping hours, instead visiting earlier in the day or earlier in the week to avoid those big crowds. We observed a preference for one-stop shopping and visiting specialty retail stores, and also spending less time in stores. Foot traffic to specialty retail stores has remained well below levels since the pandemic began, while traffic to large format stores like Walmart and Costco remained elevated. This shift in consumer behavior will likely indicate a preference for one-stop shopping versus making multiple trips to a specialty retailer as a result of the pandemic. Across all categories, consumers are spending less time in stores, likely taking advantage of curbside pickup for online orders. And lastly, we observed a renewed focus on home improvement and at-home fitness during shelter in place. Foot traffic to hardware and arts and crafts stores spiked significantly following the outbreak as many consumers took up home improvement and or crafting projects early on in the onset of the pandemic. Likewise, sporting goods stores like Dick's Sporting Goods saw a noticeable uptick in foot traffic following the outbreak, as many consumers purchased equipment for at-home workouts, while gyms unfortunately remain closed. So let's take some time right now and go through month by month and pull out some of those trends and review. As non-essential businesses were forced to close, essential businesses spiked. I think we all remember the times where we were racing to get to a grocery store or to a warehouse to stock up on toilet paper or hand sanitizer. These numbers here directly reflect that. Grocery stores were up 19% nationally as compared to as of March 13th, 2020. Traffic to warehouses also picked up with visits in upwards of 39% as of March 13th, and in New York City, up to 59%. Lastly,
Wow.
kind of no surprise here, Tom, liquor stores saw a significant uptick at the onset of the pandemic. We saw 25%.
I don't recall seeing liquor stores as an essential service, but I get it.
I think that could be a follow-up discussion.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so, trends for these particular essential designated businesses remain steady and increased. Here, what we illustrate is just a graphical representation of the different categories, whether it's a drugstore, a convenience store, a liquor store, big box store. And again, we saw that 39% uptick for the warehouse locations and a 4% uptick in visits to convenience stores. As we came into April of last year, it was not fun for anybody. We saw a significant decline in foot traffic as we all tried our best to protect our friends, families, and loved ones. While foot traffic was considerably down to hotels, movie chains, gyms, clothing stores, dining restaurants, we did see an uptick in visitation to hardware stores. We saw this to be a trend that carried out through the remainder of 2020 and is still existing today. Through April 2020, visits to stores like Lowe's and Home Depot were up 56% nationally and 71% in the Midwest as of April 24th, 2020. So we see here at the bottom, we have our dates right there at the 3/14/2020 to 3/20/20. We see a significant decline. Movie theaters were impacted significantly. And as we tapered off through the year, we maintained a relatively stable observation of foot traffic to bars, hotels, dining, restaurants, movie theaters, and shopping malls.
Yeah, it would be really interesting to see that slide overlaid with the uptick in online, right? So you can see as stores were closed or the essential businesses remained open, even then, we saw a decline in consumers really wanting to get out and expose themselves. So there's just this massive spike in online around this time.
Yeah, and Tom, it's really about that marrying of data and then building out cohorts and then running and training models on top of that, right? So as we clip through April, that uptick in hardware stores was led by the Midwest with an increase of 71%, while the West carried in a strong 48% to the beginning of the pandemic. As we fast forward into July, it changed a little bit. The idea that doors would remain open and the way of life would return back to normal, we see that in some of the regions within the country where traffic over the 4th of July weekend picked up considerably. In other parts of the country, for instance, the West and the Northeast, visitation to parks, celebratory centers, traveling remain low. Foot traffic to bars returned to pre-pandemic levels in the Midwest over the 4th of July weekend. Bar visits in the West remain down and upwards of negative 35% as of July 24th. And with some of the consumers choosing to celebrate at home, we saw that to be a strong trend within the West and the Northeast corridors. Warehouses saw a steady uptick nationally as of July 3rd, and foot traffic to grocery stores across the Northeast and West were up anywhere from 2 to 3% as of July 4th. And of course, liquor stores saw a spike in the 4th of July weekend, led strongly by the Midwest and Northeast, up 12% as of July 10th. Again, here, just a visual representation of the language represented on the past slide. We see at the onset of the pandemic a significant spike across all regions to grocery stores. And then as we tapered off, we also see that same heartbeat take place towards July 4th, 7th, and 8th, as you see represented there as a little hiccup there.
So do you think this indicates, I'm always fascinated by data like this, where, obviously we got the huge spike, in March and April, depending on the retailer, like groceries, for example.
Hmm.
But, this chart kind of implies that, as humans, we just return back to our normal ways. Are you seeing anything like that?
Yes, we are. It's been this very, while there was a significant surge online, right? E-com for brands that didn't have resources dedicated to their
Right,
e-commerce strategy, that shifted overnight. Um, and I don't think you could call a retailer that had not seen that shift and net new revenue being acquired through that channel. Um, of course, with the being able to innovate quickly, release new tools and solutions in an efficient manner, like curbside pickup, I think appeased to the folks that still wanted to go to retail stores. But then, of course, the ability for either curbside pickup and or to have direct ship to home, um,
right.
I think really hit the ball there through the pandemic.
Interesting.
Yeah. Tom, and we expect this to level out. We see there to be a concerted desire from the consumer to return back to the brick and mortars. We expect there to be some really awesome transformation strategies that will take
Right.
place that will blend that physical traditional retail store and an e-commerce type feel or experience as being kind of the new way moving forward. So I think that we're going to see that um, as a common trend as we come into year two of the pandemic and hopefully put this in a rear view mirror.
Nice.
Very good. And so, yes, again, with the liquor stores, again, we see the same exact spikes that we saw with the grocery stores here, primarily led by the Midwest and the Northeastern corridor. And as we moved into October, I can admit this was a strong trend for myself. Um,
Hmm.
if I'm to reminisce for a moment, I remember April feeling as though I was in a movie. I would drive my car around the neighborhood and out on popular streets, and no cars existed. And it was eerie. There was no traffic on the highway. It was desolate. Um, and then as we continued through the year, and folks got used to, uh, I wouldn't call it the new normal, but they adapted, right? We as humans adapt to our environments in the best we can. And what we saw was that folks were in a very large number, even compared to year over year, traveling outdoors and visiting parks and trails on a regular basis. Primarily due to indoor entertainment venues being closed, we saw this uh, outdoor visitation behavior extend further into fall than traditionally. In some instances, up over 10% from previous year, whether you were visiting a park or a trail. Nationally, foot traffics to parks and trails remained elevated through the fall, and as of October 23rd, 2020, visits were up 35% to parks versus 10% as of the same date, looking back year over year, and 52% for 2020, and up 7% if you're looking back at the same trend in 2019. So as you can imagine, if you're spending more time outside, we should see visitation patterns to supply stores, sporting goods increase. Um, with the apologies here, with the supply stores, the outdoor supply stores, we did see an increase of 8%, and visits to the sporting goods shops were only down 5% as of October 23rd. The reason why we saw that is because at the time, and as we saw through the second half of last year, different states allowed for different types of businesses to be opened and closed. And so we believe that that slight downtick in visitation to the sporting goods shops could have been played into effect due to some of the rules that were enacted on a state by state or perhaps even a county by county basis. Unfortunately, foot traffic to electronic stores, game stores, bookstores, while they did remain stable through last year, they were still down anywhere from 15 to 29% as of October 23rd, 2020. And here we show parks, steady, healthy, a lot of people getting outside, exercising, visiting retail locations which they could acquire workout and gym equipment. Healthy trend here, picked up over July as well. Really nice to see. Visitation to parks remained up as well. And again, visitation to trails picked up as well. At the end of this presentation, your teams will receive this and sample data files of the analyses that we've done here. So apologies for skipping through those slides a bit quicker. As we jumped into November, and this is where things got a bit more exciting for everyone, a shift in holiday shopping behavior and celebrations started to take place. A trend of one-stop shopping behavior emerged early on in the pandemic, as foot traffic to large format retail stores remained elevated and visits to specialty retail stores unfortunately continued to decline. Large formats retailers such as big box, warehouse, and even grocery stores offer consumers the opportunity to shop across all categories in one place, avoiding multiple trips, especially to retail stores while out and about. Big box stores saw anywhere from 5 to 12% increase, warehouses 23 to 31, and grocery stores 10 to 16%. When we look back at how that looked in 2019, we saw that visitation to big box stores was down 4% as of the same time period a year before, 1% for warehouses, and 7% nationally for grocery store chains.
So, this is an interesting one. You kind of glossed over it, that I hope the audience picked up on, but this kind of trend of one-stop shopping, or my human nature now, or maybe my habits have changed to where I want to avoid those multiple trips again. And I'm probably putting you on the spot again, but this is all, hindsight. What do you think that's going to be a trend that carries forward? Or again, do you think, as humans, we're just going to return to the same old as soon as we put this pandemic in the rearview mirror?
That's a really good question, Tom.
Yeah.
I think what brands should be thinking about is that blending of physical retail and the digital e-com platform.
Exactly.
I think technology and tools that enable technology to be tested and implemented quickly and then tossed into production. I think those that dedicate time and resources to strategically leveraging the data and additional data sets that will help them understand their consumer better.
Right.
I think that's where it starts, Tom. And
Yep.
those learnings from the physical layer of the world, coupled with the clicks, the abandoned shopping carts, the transaction data, the dwell time on a particular site, the number of items, all the thousands of different data points that can be matched together. I think when those analyses really take hold and we start leveraging ML solutions to get us answers quickly, I think that will inform the new era of technology, if you will, the new look and feel of what a retail store is in a post-pandemic environment.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're spot on. I mean, stores are still going to be extremely important, but I was just even looking at data yesterday. During the pandemic, we saw online shopping spike. I even saw one retailer, it was over 200%. So depending on the retailer, and I would have expected that to calm back down to the normal, 12 to 15% growth per year. But even as of yesterday, it was still sustained at right around 46, 47% growth. So I think you're spot on. Retailers, while we might not necessarily be able to predict whether that habit sticks as a trend or they return to normal,
Right.
I think you have to start be looking at, I no longer have channels. I have basically contact points with my customers, and I would argue that that retailers should be thinking that that web presence or their online presence should become their flagship store now, and they've got to start, investing in making that website just as experiential as, being able to shop physically in the stores. So I think it's cool that the data starts pointing to things, or at least giving us, some more insights into what we should be looking at.
Yeah. And all this gets really interesting when you start mashing it up with like demographic data as well, right? As we have that within our data sets, helping augment that view, I think is going to be very important. But also, in a fully agreeing with your statement that like there will be foot traffic back to the retail locations, but their flagship store is and should be the e-commerce side. I think that as Fortune 100, 500, 1000, you name it, as businesses start to adapt to our environment and have perhaps a 2-week, 3 days, 4 days a week work in the office, I think once consumers are back into that mode, individuals, us, back in that mode of visiting an office, going to an airport and flying to meet friends, family, and customers, I think
Right,
once we get back into that routine, that is where we'll start to see I think you're going to probably see a tighter look on big box or just retailer brick and mortar purchases being closer to those significant rises that we've seen on the e-commerce platform. But again, that'll be
right,
definitely driven by organizations like ours and how they choose to work with their employees moving forward.
exactly.
Yeah. Thanks, Tom. Okay, guys, we have right about 5-6 slides left, so I'm going to crank through these. I want to afford us enough time for our Q&A at the end. We have about 13 minutes left, and I want to get us in for about a good 7 to 10 minutes. So here, looking at the warehouses, visitation to Sam's Clubs and Costco's remained high coming into Thanksgiving, led primarily by the Northeastern corridor. We saw traffic up, again, 23-31% as of November 25th. Big box stores, of course, notably picked up at the exact same time for both Thanksgiving and Black Friday, up 10% for big box retailers like Walmart and Target, looking at November 25th, 2020. So what does all this mean? Well, hopefully we're going to get back to normal. We will. Foot traffic to outdoor destinations like to parks and trails, we expect that to remain elevated throughout the remainder of the second year of the pandemic. As a result, we see visitation to outdoor supply and sporting goods stores should continue to outpace other specialty retail categories as consumers focus on outdoor activities like camping and hiking. We expect to see shorter dwell times within the retail stores, and I think this is primarily driven, one, just due to the environment that we're in, the news cycles, the mist in the air of a pandemic. So we expect to see online ordering increasing. We expect to see curbside pickup increasing, and thus a bit shorter dwell time in the stores. And lastly, we expect the retailers to start to see a shift in consumer shopping behavior as the pandemic continues. Many Americans will continue to work remotely, and while retail stores may continue to see slightly higher foot traffic midday and earlier in the week compared to pre-pandemic trends. And again, the takeaways, consumers are still consuming. As simple as that may sound, it's important that to not don't run away from a brick and mortar strategy. Like, embrace the data sets that you have, leverage the teams and resources through your partners, and look for opportunities to be smarter, to respond quicker, and activate more effectively as we move through this time. We think that localization is ever more important. As I started with this conversation, we've looked at it from a national and regional level, but we look at over 28,000 chains across the world with a heavy focus here in the United States, span over 200 countries, 55 territories. The data that we looked at today can be really drilled down to a venue, a particular address location, and of course can be extrapolated back out to a DMA view. So you can start to look at competitive analyses, footfall traffic, shift share analyses to your own locations, to competitor locations, to start to back this foot traffic data into your enrichment strategies, your marketing, your advertising and targeting strategies. So we get incredibly macro, but then very, very micro. And then lastly, aligning with the consumer's mindset. Tom was absolutely right. Like, e-com is going to become kind of like the flagship. And so building out that user experience to be personalized based on a multitude of different inputs, I think is going to be very important. And on the flip side of that, how brands engage with their consumers, serving relevant content by means of an email, a push notification, an advertisement is vital in being able to keep top of mind with your consumers.
Yes, so this is
this is for you,
I was going
Tom.
to say this. I was just going to add, this has been, fascinating because again, it's not, you have to kind of, look at the data and figure out where things are going. And, and part of some of the takeaways I got on top of yours were, that one-stop shopping and avoiding multiple trips just stood out to me. The shorter dwell times, all of that is telling me that, yeah, physical stores are going to still play a part, but as a retailer, you probably need to be thinking, convenience and safety and, how you're going to, set your stores to maintain social distancing. How are you going to make sure that those customers that do come into your stores feel they're in a safe environment? And then of course you also mentioned the buy online, pick up at curb, which has just been a huge shift where many retailers got caught unable to do that and had to rapidly implement things. So this whole continued innovation around digital transformation is just, retailers got to take this data and figure out what it's telling them.
Yeah, most definitely, Tom. So Tom, where can I get this data from?
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I knew that was going to be the first question. And by the way, folks, we're at the end and we've got about 6 minutes left here. So remember, if you've got questions for Ryan, drop them into the Q&A box and we'll do our best to get to them. But yeah, the first place to go again, as I started off this webinar, AWS Data Exchange, or ADX, started, or we launched that in 2019. We continue to add data sets, and specifically for the Foursquare stuff here, you want to go to the aws.amazon.com, go to Marketplace or Data Exchange and do a search for Foursquare, and you're going to find some pretty compelling data sets there. I think I was just looking this morning, Ryan, and you've got 17 offers out there for retailers, with most of them free trials. So that's pretty cool.
Yep, that's right, Tom.
So how about, let's look at some questions coming in here. Well, and I had a couple for you, Ryan. One of the things, and if, in fact, I almost chuckle because, when you buy stocks, they always say, hey, past performance is no guarantee of future performance, and you got to be careful. And, as we look at this data, we want to try to find, the longer term trends. But the problem we have now is COVID has just blown up the data, right?
Mhm.
We can no longer kind of rely on a lot of our historical data. So what thoughts do you have on that? How do we take this data and maybe help retailers, continue or, at least get more accurate with their predictions?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Tom. We have two primary types of data sets here. We have our places data set, which is made up of over 95 million POIs. We just launched that new data set a few weeks ago with our enterprise API as well to go along with. Visitation for that product, we go back in upwards of 3 years. And so while 2019, I'm sorry, 2020 was kind of a wash, we do have historical data available and also net new and present data available. Our second product being our visits product, which is where we ascertain the insights for this presentation today and for our past analyses. That data set goes back to July of last year, so nearly 180 days back, and is readily available. That data set would be primarily used, Tom, for the enrichment strategies that we touched on at a couple different points during the conversation, which really bleeds into, and I'm sure, in fact, as I see some of the attendees in this list, are folks that we already have active evaluations of that data set ongoing. And the goal for some of those folks is all around personalization. And how do we get that clearer picture of who that user is that purchases once a week? And how can we better engage with them to have them purchase perhaps, as I said, once a week, perhaps once a month, but how do I get them back in for a second visit, or how do I convert them for another transaction online?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So then I had, well, one I'll take right off the bat here. Are we going to share this deck? And the answer is, of course. I don't know how you're going to do it, Ryan, but I'm assuming you guys will post that or have it available to the attendees to come get. So look for that. Did you want to add to that?
No, that'll be correct.
Yeah.
Everybody that registered will receive the link to the webinar and some additional content as well.
Okay.
And if there are any additional questions to everyone out there that may not have spoken up, please either reach out to us at hello@foursquare.com or reach out to our AWS teammates, Kara or Mohsen, there on the email addresses as well.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And also this is being recorded, so we'll post the recording if you have peers you'd like to sit in and listen on this. So look, we're approaching right at time now, so I think I'm just going to leave it with one final question for you, Ryan. I'll put you on the spot because this is your opinion, and we won't come around until next year and test whether you were right or not. Okay. But based on, again, what you're seeing just in the data that you guys have collected, give me your three top predictions in terms of consumer habits and how that's going to change their interactions with retail.
So from a prediction, I would anticipate that while levels, there will be some categories that suffer. I think last year we saw some interesting strategies by some of those in striking deals with the likes of HBO and other streaming platforms. I think it'll be interesting to see how the movie theater industry pivots with the Goliath of what online streaming is and the traditional experience in going to a theater. I think that's going to be a very interesting sub-vertical to look at as we move forth. How do they come back and what strategies do they put in place? I think we'll see a healthy resurgence in our travel and hospitality industry as offices, employers, and families start to become vaccinated and there's more
Right.
comfortability in traveling. I expect those industries to pick up. And then for the broader big box warehouse electronic stores, I see there to be a very fail fast type mentality in looking for new technologies or data sets to help propel them to maintaining their position at being key players within their respective verticals.
All right. Perfect. So with
Excellent.
that, we're just a minute over time. So I apologize to our attendees for going over. But with that, Ryan, we will visit this next year and hold you accountable to your predictions. And but again, fascinating webinar. Again, I love the data. The data tells incredible stories. So folks, thank you for attending. Again, you can expect to get this presentation delivered to you and the webinar on demand. All right, thank you.
Thank you all. Stay safe. Bye-bye.